A warm welcome to another episode of Meet the CEOs. I'm your host, Daniel Wikberg, CEO and founder of Upsales. Today we have a truly exceptional guest who has not only left an unforgettable mark on the software world, but has also become an icon when it comes to complex sales. John McMahon is the only person having been the CEO of 5 public enterprise software companies. In 2021, he released his book, The Qualified Sales Leader, which became an instant success all over the world. And today, John sits on the board of several public software companies, including Snowflake and MongoDB. So warm welcome, John, and thanks for taking the time to join us today.
All right. Thank you, Daniel. I'm glad to be speaking to you today. Thanks.
We appreciate it. I'm curious. I mean, you're known as one of the world's leading experts at MEDDIC. Could you tell us kind of the backstory of how you got involved with it to begin with?
It was really, an invention of necessity. So when I was first working at PTC, at that time, we would do a new release every 6 months.
Right.
Which seemed strange because today you could do a new release every hour or every minute.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but it was a major release. So for the first 7 releases, the product didn't work. So,
all right,
that was 3.5 years where we just basically the sales process was demo and close. So we were no different than really pot and pan salespeople or vacuum cleaner salespeople that once they had their foot in the door, they give you a really fancy demo, and then they're really hard to get out of the door.
Right.
So that's really what our sales process was. But then in release 7, we decided, okay, the product's ready where we can actually do things like benchmarks or POVs or POCs. What happened then is we were competing against 2 $1 billion revenue companies that had a very broad product offering. So we knew that if we just went into a POC or a POV against the competition, that they could make the criteria so wide that we would never win. So what we always were doing is that time we focused and said, we have to nail the decision criteria, because if we can't nail it and frame it in a box where we know we can win, then there's no sense in even playing. We might as well just pull out of the POC, just not play. So,
right.
And actually that gave us like a really bad reputation because a lot of customers would want to test the product and we would say, no, we're not going to do it. And they'd say, why not? And we basically would say, in so many words, well, you're not buying what we're selling, so we're never going to win anyway. So then what happened is we started to lock down the criteria, but then we also found that there was the competition, especially the install-based competition, had really strong champions in the accounts.
Right.
And what they would do is they would start to change the process on us. So we locked down the criteria, but they would change the process where they could make us do something else or maybe do another benchmark or POC where they would add more to the criteria. So then we decided to say, okay, now we got to lock down what is the criteria and what is every single step of the process between doing a POC and getting an order. And if we don't know every step and every person involved, then we're not playing.
Right.
So that was the first 2 Ds. Then we realized, well, this is getting really difficult for us to control it because we keep leaving the account and every time we come back, something changes. So, and we have these coaches, these people that like us a lot, but they don't seem to have any power. Like they can't really control and keep the criteria fixed in that framework that we wanted. And the process keeps changing. Like this is really frustrating. Right. So let's go find these people that we call champions that have political power or real technical respect. And let's get those people to be our champions. And then once that happened, that was like the C in MEDDIC. And that was the people that could help us once we locked down the criteria and explain what the process was. And anytime the competition tried to change the process, they would, shut it down. Sorry about that phone ringing. I thought I had it turned off.
No worries.
So now we started winning. We had a champion. We had the 2 Ds. We could lock down the criteria, lock down the process. And we were starting to win, we'd win a couple seats. At that time, you sold licenses by the seats. By a seat was basically when an engineer used your product.
Right.
So then we said, well, this is good, but now that we won 5 or 10 seats, this company has 500 engineers. Why don't we try to get all the seats? So then we would go up and we talk to the VP of engineering or the CEO of the company, and we started talking in terms of features and functions. And they were like, oh, stop, like time out. I have a CAD director. He's 4 or 5 levels down below. Why don't you go speak to him?
Right.
So we started to learn how we had to speak the language of the economic buyer. So instead of speaking in technical terms, when we got up there, we started to talk about engineering productivity, engineering costs, time to market. And those types of things resonated, and we would never mention the acronym CAD or mention any real technical stuff. We would just talk about other companies that got their product to market a lot quicker. So, but to do that, we even found that was kind of an empty conversation, because then that economic buyer would send us back down to some other people and we might have a champion, but we could never really get the whole thing because we didn't have any metrics around what they were currently doing and how much our product could really save them. So that started to become, let's identify the pain that they have, the problem that they have, if they just told us they had a problem. Or sometimes some companies had an initiative, like they knew they needed to change. So let's identify that and let's go get the before metrics, of what their current state is, and now what we could do through the terms of the benchmark or the POC, what the after scenario would be, and put that together in an ROI and present that to the economic buyer with real dollar savings or real dollars that they could capture in the market by getting their product out the door quicker. So that was really the genesis of MEDDIC. It didn't happen like when a couple guys just sat in a room and came up with it. It was something like that came out over the years of just getting your head beat in by losing too much. And you started to figure out, like, I just have to really qualify these situations before I'm going to actually ever sell anything, So that's the short story.
Right. So it's kind of an iterative, organic process of just solving one problem after the other, basically.
Yes. I've read stuff on the internet where people say that some people sat in a room and just came up with the idea. That's not how it happened. That's not how most things happen.
Right. Exactly.
It's always an iterative process, no matter what it is.
Right. And I mean, rumor has it that you also updated you're responsible for the P when we're talking about MEDDIC. For paper process and then C for competition.
Right.
Can you share? I mean, is there a story related to that as well?
That story really came now when the salespeople were standing in front of you. And so the first part was really how to qualify the customer. But now, if you wanted to use it for a forecasting tool also, and you have your salespeople sitting up in front of you, and let's say there's 6 weeks to go in the quarter, and they say, okay, I'm going to forecast this deal. So then you say, hey, Daniel, that's great. Well, walk me through what the paper process is inside the account, especially if it was a new account, on how you get from, let's say, a capital appropriations request all the way to a purchase order. Who's involved? What steps are involved? And walk me through that time frame. Well, I don't know. You don't know. Well, it could be 8 weeks or it could be 10 weeks to get that paper process down. So that became part of forecasting. And then I was always surprised to ask a sales rep, well, who's the competition? They'd say, I don't have any competition. Oh, that used to drive me crazy because you always have competition, especially in bigger accounts these days where they're forced, at least many accounts are forced to go get 2 or 3 quotes before they buy anything. So if you don't think if you think you were sneaking through the account and no one was noticing you and you're getting ready to get $1 million deal, guess what? Purchasing is going to go call the competition. So no matter what, you're going to have competition. And what are you doing to ensure that you're going to win against the competition? Because they're going to come in, they're going to go to the top really quickly. They're going to throw a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt about you and your product, and they're going to mix it up. So I always was trying to force the salespeople to understand, like, what are you doing about the competition? Is the competition's champion stronger than your champion? You know, in an internal battle, when you're not there and the competition's champion's in the room and your champion's in the room and they're having a big discussion, who's going to win that discussion on which product to buy?
I mean, I think that's interesting related to, we actually had a painful experience here at Upsales. We had a deal a while back with, we really had the economic buyer, but we kind of lacked the champion. But we thought, you know, we have the economic buyer, so we're going to win anyway, but we ended up losing that deal. So do you think that's a common case, that salespeople kind of overstress the importance of the EB as opposed to the champion?
Yeah, and the reason is if you think about it, like as salespeople, we need a champion to get us to the economic buyer. But if you're the economic buyer, you need a champion for the implementation.
Right.
And success of that implementation. So it's really rare. In fact, I don't think I've seen it in the last 10 years or more, where an economic buyer is going to make a decision without having a champion that's totally responsible and bought in to taking the product, implementing that product, and making it successful. So that's why I think you have to have a champion, because the EB needs one too.
Right, right. So, I mean, from your experience with this, what are kind of the most common mistakes you see when companies start using the MEDDIC framework?
Well, I think a lot of people they say they use it, but they don't really use it. And if the most common mistake is that they mix up a coach with a champion. And they don't really have a champion. They have a coach. The coach wants them to win. The coach loves the product. The coach gives them inside information, but the coach just simply doesn't have the power inside the organization to do what I was talking about before, where you control the criteria, control the decision process, and more importantly, get you a meeting and sponsor a meeting to the economic buyer. And the reason that you need that so much is when you don't have it, you walk into an account, every time you walk in, something's changed, like I said before. When you have a really solid champion, because they're helping you control the criteria and control the process, things move from unpredictable to very predictable. You're no longer surprised. You know, now you walk in the account, you talk to your champion. Hey, last time I was here, we said that this was going to happen. What happened? Yes, that happened. Okay, what's the next step? Everything's very predictable. But that's the biggest mistake that people make, is confusing a coach with a champion. I also think that people just use it as like a checkbox. But but when you're really smart about MEDDIC and trying to understand and really qualify what's going on, you can see that a lot of these pieces start to play together too. And you can also start, if it overlaps on your sales process, which it's supposed to be. Like my analogy is that if I was going to drive from Boston to New York, I would use Google Maps, and it's going to give me the ideal route. You go through this route. That's like a sales process. You follow this route, it's the ideal route to an order. Right. But then when I'm driving and I'm an hour into the drive and I have to pull over to get some gas or something, and I want to get back on track, you know, I'm using the GPS system that's connected to the map that's telling me, here's where you are, here's where you should have been, here, make these turns to get yourself back on the highway. So MEDDIC is like a GPS for a sales process. And when it's done right, you can also help to train your sales reps. So if in stage 2 of your sales process, they're failing to get certain information or get certain meetings, there's maybe stage 2 and step 3 in that stage. You can start to figure out, why do they keep failing there? Is it because they lack a knowledge of how to do it? Or is it because they don't have the skill set to do it? So it's no different than, you know, any sports team you go to, you get a playbook. Right. So you get a playbook in hockey and they tell you exactly what the plays are. And that players know, like, when I'm going to make this pass, that Daniel's got to be like on the blue line when I make this pass. Right. And if Daniel's not on the blue line as the coach, I think, oh man, he's lacking the knowledge of the playbook. If he is there and he can't catch the pass, then I think I got a skill problem, right? But as a coach, I now know what to train Daniel on. Right. So MEDDIC can be used for so many different things, but I think most people just use it as like a checkbox because their boss told them to do it, but the boss isn't really bought in either.
Right.
But there are organizations that use it very well.
Right. So I think a related question to that. I mean, a lot of entrepreneurs and we at Upsales as well. I mean, we're trying to move up the value chain and close larger deals. And I think at the beginning of a transition, it's kind of a balancing act to like continue pursuing the smaller deals you can close within the quarter versus like putting in the efforts to winning more long-term larger deals. I mean, especially we're also a public company and you have to make the numbers. What would your advice be for entrepreneurs trying to find this kind of sweet spot between short-term revenue versus like long-term, more strategic deals?
It is a balancing act, Daniel, because you do need the what you might call base business, coming from those smaller deals. Because if you just turn on a dime and only try to go after the very large enterprise deals, it's going to be really lumpy. So you, as a public company, you're not going to get these smooth quarters that are going to be up and to the right. So it's a balancing act between keeping that base business, but starting to work the longer term deals. So, I mean, you'd probably need to assign, reps to get into one or two, enterprise deals that are going to take some time while they're still closing these smaller deals.
Right.
And then you have to be really smart about how you do it. I mean, the bigger deals are going to take a lot more homework. So before you even go into the account, you have to go do as much homework as you can. Like, here in the US, you can go into and read people's annual report. You can read something that's called the 10K, where the CEO actually has to sign off on the document that talks about their entire business. And there's a section in there called the, business risk factors. And in there, they have to outline all the risks to the business. Now, some of that's boilerplate because it might say like a hurricane could hit or the economy could tank. But there's other times where they actually specify things that they're starting to work on that they're having trouble with in their business. And that's where good salespeople, can Google the executives, they can read the 10K, they can read the annual report, and they can come in with understanding what the use cases are that their product can align to, and they come in prepared. They're not just coming in to just start to ask questions. They already come in with like a problem statement, like, I've been doing homework on your account, and here's some of the things that I've already found. Now, maybe you won't be 100% accurate, but you've opened the discussion where they respect you as a salesperson because of the fact that you've truly done your homework. And they may say, well, that's kind of a good statement, but here's what I would change to it. You might want to add this and delete that. Okay, so now you're already in a really deep conversation about what their use case is and what some of the pains and problems are with that use case that need to be addressed. So I find that, the people that really do well are the people that really do their homework before they go in the account. Like, I've been in some accounts where we've done our homework so well that customers would ask us, where did you get that information? Because it was the first time we met with the executives.
Right.
And we had such detailed information. They swore that somebody inside was giving us the information.
Okay.
And then we would laugh and say, it's all public information.
Right. So basically find like one or two reps and start assigning them with a few like high value accounts while you continue to kind of keep the business running, I guess.
Well, anytime that I've run a sales force, you typically have a number of reps that gravitate towards those bigger deals naturally, right? So you might let them gravitate towards those deals, keep them with a smaller territory where they can still make some money on some of the smaller accounts, but you give them some of those bigger accounts. Let them understand how to really win with your product and take that knowledge and transfer it, to the rest of the sales force on here's exactly what I did. Here's some of the problems I ran into. Here's some things we need to change as an organization in order to really get into these enterprise accounts.
Right.
I used to call some of those people artists because they could just do things that other sales reps, you needed to be very prescriptive in what you told them and told them how to do it. Whereas there were other people that were like artists. They could just do things naturally that some of the other sales reps couldn't do.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I still go to sales calls occasionally.
Yeah.
And I think some of the reps, it's like watching a symphony, and it's kind of a beautiful thing, actually.
Yes, it is. Yes. Yeah.
So another question. In your book, you mentioned that a lot of sales managers don't know who the top performing salespeople are within their team, and that it can be hard to kind of know the strengths and weaknesses of each team member. So how do you think leaders should work to best kind of map the performance, strengths, and weaknesses of the individual reps?
Yeah, it goes back to what I said previously, where I think you have to look at the sales process and each stage of the sales process and each step within the stages and understand where they're running into trouble. You'll see some reps that can't find champions. Okay, let's go back. What are you doing prior to trying to find a champion? You know, what are you doing in the discovery process? What are you doing in the scoping process? Scoping being like trying to quantify the pains and the issues. You know, maybe they're doing something wrong there that they can't find a champion. Some people can't get to the economic buyer. Maybe they just have coaches, or they can't really build a champion that can buy into taking them to the economic buyer. So I always like to take a look at their deals, each deal, and figure out where are they going wrong? Where are they stopping? What's preventing them from moving this deal forward? And then go dissect that. And typically it's something prior to where they are today or where they think they are today. Because a lot of times if you ask them, well, where are you right now? Oh, I'm in stage 3. But when you really start to use MEDDIC and you really start to quantify or qualify, you'll find out, oh, they're really back here in step 2 of stage 2. They're not where they think they are. And there it goes back then again to understanding, is it a knowledge issue or is it a skill issue? No different than sports. Same thing.
Right.
And then you'll also find that, you know, different reps have different issues, but typically there's 1 or 2 issues that your whole sales force has, and then you have to train them on that.
So I think an issue for a lot of, or a challenge for a lot of sales organizations when doing the transition to more high value complex deals is coaching the reps to do the proper plan and research for each account or in their portfolio. So how do we coach the team to really excel at doing the grunt work and coming up with a plan for each individual account?
Well, first you have to train them. But what I did is I would take one person that was really good at building what I call business value assessments and have that person not only train the sales force like in a classroom setting, but then assign them to go with some of the sales reps into these larger accounts and actually show them the information they needed in order to build, not only gather the information, not only work with the customer, but to actually, how do you present this information to, you know, a high-level executive and especially even a CFO? How do you build an ROI model and put it in a business case where you can talk about, you know, operational benefits and also business impact? You know, because when you look at building ROI models, like I might make people more productive so that, like in my book, I talk about we have to speak the language of the person that we're speaking to and understand the way in which they're measured. So if I'm making engineers, let's say, more productive, they may get measured on how fast that they can try to put that product out the door.
Right.
And the engineers get a benefit of that on their, because that's how they're measured. But when I go up to the economic buyer, now I start to talk a different language. I start to talk more in terms of the profitability you're going to gain because maybe you're the first 2 companies to market with a product. You know, the cost efficiencies you've gained in engineering because you could get the product out the door, those types of things. So it's not really cookie cutter when you put these business value assessments together. You have to understand that I'm going to present it to maybe my champion that's at one level, but I have to then go up to the next level and present it maybe in a little bit different terms also.
Right.
So coming all the way back is, one, you have to find somebody in your organization that knows how to do this, is basically the master class of business value assessments. Get them to train your whole sales force, and then get them to go out individually with people. Because once the salesperson learns from that business value consultant, and they've been through the whole process, they don't need to do it again. They can basically do it on their own.
Right.
And then the other reps see that these multi-million-dollar deals can come in if I just learn how to do this. And now the really good ones start to transfer, and they all want to get in on it. What you will find, though, is that it's like any organization that grows really fast. There's some people that will adapt, and there's other people that just won't adapt.
Right.
So one of the things I always look for, having been in really fast growing startup companies, is when I'm interviewing somebody, I'm looking for coachability, but I'm also looking for adaptability, because a lot of people can be coached. They can say, yes, John, I hear you. Oh, that's a good idea. I'm going to really try that. But they never adapt. And as you grow, your product changes, your customers change, your competition changes, and your messaging changes, and your reps have to change, and they have to adapt. If they don't adapt, they get left behind. And some of them just don't make it.
All right. Let me read a quote from your book. So if sales managers hire C-grade players and do everything else perfectly, like onboarding, training, developing, and maintaining a great sales process, the team will still have a difficult time. However, if you hire only A-grade players and do everything else average, the A players will help you find a way to win. So my question to you is then, how do you actually make sure you're only hiring A players to the team?
Yeah. Well, that's a little bit of an exaggeration, that whole quote, because I'm trying to get a point across that you have to hire A players. So to hire A players, if you think about, I think about a 2x2 matrix where, as a person, they can have, which we talked about before, they can have knowledge. They can come in with knowledge, some certain knowledge that they have. It could be in the domain. It may not be in the domain of the product that they're going to sell. They have a certain skill set, right? They have a track record. That's some of their experiences that they have. And then the last one is the characteristics. Now, for me, I believe it's all about the characteristics. So I've been willing, like when I sold, as an example, we'll go back to PTC, when I sold mechanical computer-aided design products, I didn't care if a person knew anything about computer-aided design, didn't know anything about engineering. I didn't care. And still to this day, I don't really care if they understand the domain. I mean, it helps, but I don't really care. I care more about the characteristics. So what characteristics are really important? Number one is intelligence. If they're super intelligent, they're going to pick up the knowledge that we talked about.
Right.
If they're super driven, super competitive, they're going to pick up the skills. Why? Because skills take thousands of repetitions, right? So if you're not willing to, stand in your backyard and take 1,000 shots with the hockey puck every day, you're just not going to get good at shooting the puck. Right. And it's the same thing in sales. If you're not willing to put the repetitions in because you don't have the drive, then you're just not going to master that skill. Then from there, it's things like integrity. It's things like and then the two big ones that we talked about is, coachability and adaptability, right? Because we know that if we're going to be in a fast growing company, again, things are going to change. They're going to constantly change. And we need people that are not only coachable, but they're adaptable. And if they're adaptable, that also means that there's a high probability that when I hire them as a sales rep, they're smart, they know how to get the skills because they're driven, they're coachable, they're adaptable, they have high integrity, that their chances are they're going to get to become in a leadership position. The other one that I really like a lot is curiosity. Like they're just intellectually curious. They're always wondering why, like, how come? I don't understand. Tell me more. That says that they're going to learn. So those are the things I look for, because if you pick up a CV, or we call it a resume in the US, what does it really tell you? It doesn't really tell you anything. It tells you the jobs they had, how long they stayed at those jobs, but it doesn't really tell you how smart they are. It doesn't really tell you what type of skills that they have, right? So now, if I'm doing an interview, I'll spend the first half an hour to 40 minutes just on those characteristics before I ever dive into. I'll take the resume or CV and put it to the side, and I'm only going to speak to you about your characteristics. And if you pass that test, okay, now I'm willing to start to look at this resume and figure out some of the skills you may have and some of the experiences that you have. Otherwise, it doesn't matter to me, because characteristics, if you think about it, when you've hired wrong, what shows up 6 months later? It's not a skill or a knowledge. It's the characteristics that you think, oh my, I missed it.
Every time.
Someone has a character flaw and I missed it.
Right.
So that's what I would recommend if you're looking for A players, is go after the characteristics.
And what do you think about, I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned intelligence as the first one. I mean, I agree, selling a complex product, you need to be, you can't just be like a relational sales guy, which might work in other industries. But how do you, I mean, there are IQ tests and stuff like that, but what's your experience like? What's the best way to assess intelligence that's like relevant for a sales job in software?
Well, you can see some of the jobs that they did have. You can start to ask questions about things like that can be indicators of their intelligence. Like, well, why did you move from this job to the other job? You know,
right.
And why was it that you left? Like, what did you like about your boss? What did you not like about your boss? Tell me something that you had to learn on your own. Talk to me about the hardest thing that you had to learn. You know, talk to me about where you went to school. So there's a whole bunch of things that you can start to ask. And then you actually see in the interview also if they are very curious. Did they come into the interview prepared, you know, because they did homework on your company? That says that they're very curious and they're willing to learn and they want to learn more, right? That tells me a lot also. So there's those indicators. I also used to do this, there's a company called Profiles International, and I used to do this Profiles XT test is what they have. And the Profiles XT test, most people say, if they don't know, they say, oh, that's a personality test. No, it's not a personality test. What it is if you're, let's take a company that has like 50 people in the sales force, and then you have 10 people that are just, every year, they just keep doing great. They're knocking the number out, you know, just beating their numbers all the time. So what you do is you take the Profiles XT test and you give it to those 10 people. Because if I could hire 50 more of those people, my business is going to do really well. Right. And what it does is it looks at all their characteristics. That's all it does. You know, it has a learning index. It has like their manageability, their independence, their coachability, those types of things. And what you start to see is those 10 people kind of gravitate around the same characteristics. Why? Because at this point in your company's history, these are the people with these characteristics are doing the best. Now, 2 years from now, those characteristics might change a little bit, right? But right now, these are the best. So then you take a candidate after you've interviewed them and have them come back and take the Profiles XT. And now are they a direct match with your top 10 people? If they are, and all your people, those top 10 people are making a lot of money, they'd be stupid not to come to your company, right?
Right.
And if they're not a match, it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with them, because maybe you're a startup like the many startups I've been in. Maybe just right now, you're not a good fit for this company because you're not a good fit next to my top 10 performers.
Right.
You know, but maybe 2 years from now, when we have more resources and the sales process has changed and the products changed and the customers have changed and the competition has changed, maybe then you'll be a much better fit. But right now, you're not a good fit.
It's super interesting. And Profiles XT was the name of the company?
Name of the company is Profiles International. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
But you have to be very careful about how you present this to candidates, because they think, oh, it's a personality test. This is a weird company. You have to explain it the way that I explained it.
Right.
So that so they understand that they're basically coming in to see, you know, how do I do against their top 10 performers? And if I do well, you know, it'd be good for me. The other thing is everybody's not going to be perfect. So there's going to be some situations where you're going to hire somebody, but maybe there's some issues that they have relative to those top 10 performers. Now you have a guide as to where you need to start to train these people right away. As soon as they come in the door, I know I have a weakness. I'm going to train that weakness right away.
That's super interesting. I mean, it's basically a way of kind of extracting the magic formula of what's working now.
Yeah. And I tell you what, because you could be talked into things by your people, anytime that, we interviewed a candidate, they weren't a match, and my people came in and talked me into, we really got to hire this person for all these other reasons, and I did it. Every time they failed.
Right.
Every time.
That's interesting.
It was magic. Yeah.
All right.
So
back in the time when you were CRO, I mean, at which company would you say you experienced the greatest success in creating a winning sales team, and why? If you could pick like which one was the best experience?
Well, it was PTC. It was BladeLogic. Almost everywhere I've tried to basically take a lot of time to develop people. So that's why I probably have a couple hundred people that used to work for me that are CROs.
Right.
So, and it's because you have to put the time in to really develop people. And so I used to spend a lot of money on onboarding people, training people, developing people, holding leaders accountable for the development of their people. In fact, I used to say to all the leaders, I used to say, we're a growing company today, and I'd outline the number of positions we have at, the director level, the VP level, executive VP levels, and then show them when we grow 100% this year, here's how many more positions are going to be open. If you want one of those positions, you have to prove to me that you're able to recruit someone that you can train and develop that can take your place.
Right.
So that doesn't cost me any money, but everybody gets the message. So if they have, let's say, 3 or 4 people on their team and they want that next position, they look at those 3 or 4 people and say, they're not going to make it by next year to be able to take my place. Guess who they're going to recruit next time? They're going to recruit a superstar.
Right.
So it really helps in recruiting. And it gets them to understand that it's not about them. You have to stop being selfish as a leader, and you have to be selfless. And I used to say, I want all my people to make more money than me, because if they all make more money than me, then I certainly maxed out my sales comp plan, right?
Right.
So it's having that mentality of putting the investment, back into the people. And if you do it really good, it just comes back with huge benefits.
Right.
And let me tell you something, it's easier said than done, because you have to hold a lot of leaders accountable. There's a lot of organizations, especially the ones that I'm on the board of or have advised in the past, where they just start to get rid of sales reps. And they don't really start to ask the question of well, is this a leadership problem or is it a sales rep problem? And sometimes they wind up getting rid of 3 or 4 sales reps before they realize it was really a leadership problem. So what I used to say to people is, if you have to terminate someone, I want you to do me a favor before you come talk to me. I want you to go look in the mirror and ask yourself what you did wrong. Did you hire the wrong person, or you were unable to help train and develop that person and lead that person to success? We got to figure out which one it is. Otherwise, we're going to make the same mistake. So I held the leaders very accountable for any time that they had to get rid of a sales rep, which really, again, goes back to forcing them to try to hire the best people that they can hire and put all their efforts into training and developing those people. And when you do that, you get a culture where people are winning. And when people are winning and they see people getting promoted and they're making money, I mean, to me, there's nothing more exciting. The energy level in the offices is just off the charts.
Right. So,
but also to do that, a lot of companies don't want to get rid of the non-performers, right? And you have to create a meritocracy where the rewards go to the people that are consistently overperforming. You have to give them the rewards so that everybody wants to be over there.
Right.
And, you know, if I have a team of 5 people and I'm the leader and 4 of them are constantly overachieving and one person's not, and I don't do something to hold that person accountable, then those other 4 people are looking at me like, hey, I think this might be something wrong with my leader. Why don't they see what we see? Because those 4 people are going to lunch together, sometimes to dinner, sometimes to the bar together. Okay. And guess who they're talking about? They're talking about me and why I don't see what they see.
Exactly.
So you have to, as a leader, you have to hold the non-performers accountable. Otherwise, the performance of the other 4 people are going to say, well, you know, why do I have to keep busting my ass if this other guy's not doing anything or person's not doing anything? And John, my leader's not holding them accountable. Why do I have to work so hard? Why do I have to make that extra call? Why do I have to send that extra email? Why do I have to try to get to the next economic buyer? So it all starts to feed on itself. But when you have a really great environment with a meritocracy and everybody's winning, making money and being promoted, wow, it's an amazing feeling.
So if you had to wrap up with like one or 2 things that a sales leader could do tomorrow to build a better team, what would be your advice?
Stop being selfish, start being selfless, and start teaching your people something that they don't know today, and stop looking at them as like they're all the same individual. They're all completely different. You know, like I always think about the fact that I have kids. They grow up in the same house with the same parents. Everything's the same. My kids are completely different.
Right.
They have different strengths, different weaknesses, different goals, different insecurities and doubts and fears and desires and all those things. And as a leader, you got to understand that the people that are working for you, they're individuals and they all have those same fears, doubts, insecurities, goals, strengths, weaknesses. And it's our job as leaders to understand them so we can help them and help develop them so that they can get to the next step in their life. And if you do that with them, then they're not going to leave you.
Right.
But it's not about you. When you become a leader, you got to take your ego, unscrew it, and put it on a dresser when you leave the house in the morning.
Right.
And start thinking about your people.
All right. Thanks a lot, John, for taking the time today. This has been super, super useful stuff. So I hope everybody watching really appreciates this stuff. And again, thanks a lot for taking the time.
You're welcome, Daniel. Good to speak to you. Thank you.
Thanks.